And I'm going to talk, first of all, about my favorite subject, which is me. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the film school in London. And then I'm going to talk, if we have time, a little bit about the Western idea of story, more the British idea of story. And so that's what I'm going to do. As you know, Britain has just Brexit. That was me a few years ago. I was very, yeah, no, that's me, yeah. You see, smoking a cigarette. I was arrested in Kyoto Main Square for smoking a cigarette. They told me you're not allowed to. This is just a description of Europe, like England, terrible food, ugly girls, invented soccer, hooligans. You know, there's a way we look at the world. French, good wines, beautiful things, pretend not to speak English. You know, Germans, good machines, ugly girls, beer, wear socks and sandals. So that's just to give you a light beginning, because obviously the world is changing in the UK. I've just come back from Buenos Aires. That's me with my new friend Maradona. And then on Monday I was in Beijing. This is Beijing Wall. As you can see, it's not kind of flat. It goes kind of like this. I wanted to go to toilet, but I thought it was too far. And then I'm now in Kyoto, and so Ken's friend Mac, he sent me some pictures of Albert Einstein and Charlie Chaplin in Japan, but I don't know if they were in Kyoto. They might have been somewhere else. And that's just sort of where I've been. So this, and I'm going to talk about myself and some of the lessons which I have learnt, which may or may not apply to you. And I like to use proverbs. This is a proverb from the country of Uzbekistan. You know, in Russia, you know, you don't choose a house, you choose neighbors. That when you want to be successful at things, it's the people, not the organization or the institution that is the important thing. This is my first partner. He's a guy called Richard Branson, who owns Virgin and Virgin Atlantic. He likes to dress in women's clothes. So he made a bet with a billionaire from Southeast Asia, I think from Thailand or somewhere, which he lost, and he said if he lost it, he would dress as a Virgin stewardess. But he always had that. But what the second lesson, which I have always learnt, and it's particularly important for filmmaking, is, you know, one head is a head, two heads are gold, three heads are platinum. That this ability of people to work together is an incredibly important thing to doing really interesting work. It's much harder to do it on your own. And so myself and Richard Branson, we started a record company making records by rock musicians. And this is me at the age of 19, same age as some of you guys. I had already been in business at this point for 2 years. So I had started at 17 years old. I had left school at 16 years old. I only went to university for 1 semester, and that was because I couldn't agree my deal with Richard Branson. I couldn't agree how many shares he had and how many shares I had. But we were then selling records, other people's records, and we were like a hippie company. So these were our first employees. It's interesting, but I can remember the names of all of the women in the picture, but only a few of the men. That's me. That's Richard Branson. That's Wendy. That's Cynthia. That's another Wendy, etc. So we employed hippies because they were cheap. And they came into work very late, like 11 o'clock, but they worked late and then they would go to clubs and they would see bands and they would come back and tell me and Richard if they saw bands that were really interesting. And then we started some shops, some kind of hippie shops. And you understand the word hippie, yeah? Hippie, 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 hippie. Okay, good. And then we signed, it's a bit off the screen actually, but there you go. We signed another hippie, and he made a rock album which had no lyrics, no words on it, and that was picked up and put on William Friedkin's Hollywood film, The Exorcist, which was like a horror film. That was my first time I came in connection with the film business, because really I am a rock and roll boy who stumbled on film. And that sold a lot of copies and solved our financial problems. But it was quite interesting when we were trying to do, we call it a license, but when we were trying to sell the rights of Tubular Bells in Japan. My partner, Richard, he flew here to Japan. We went to each of the Japanese companies. And the first one, Richard went to, and they said, so how much money do you want us to pay for Japanese rights? So Richard said, like, oh, $100,000. And they all went, hi, 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 hi. And we thought, fantastic. And he called me up. He said, we got a deal for 100. And tomorrow I asked for $500,000, 500,000. So he went the next day to the second company, and he asked for 500,000. And you know, it's like 10 Japanese record executives, and they all went, hi, 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 hi. So I thought, fantastic. So then he went the next day to the third company, and then we asked $1 million. And they all did the same thing happened. And then he called me up, which is fantastic. We have 1 million from Japan. And I said to Richard, no, I have just looked up again the dictionary, the Japanese dictionary. I've talked to my Japanese friend, and hi means yes, I understand, not yes, I agree. So we had come all the way here, and we ended up with like $50,000 or something. But we thought we were getting the biggest deal of our life. And so then we went in to put out a lot of records, pop records in the 1970s. So like Culture Club and Phil Collins and the Sex Pistols and so on. And that was a lot of fun. The Sex Pistols were very controversial. And I once took Sid Vicious from London to Stockholm, and which was he spent the whole journey in the toilet, funnily enough. And I remember when we arrived at the airport in Stockholm, there was a pop group called ABBA. I don't know if you've heard of ABBA, the pop group, probably before their time. The old guys have. Have you, Ken, heard of ABBA? Yeah. There you go. But these ones haven't. So Sid said, I want to meet ABBA. And he started going towards you, the big guy, big punk, quite. And ABBA ran in the other direction. I don't think they knew it was Sid Vicious. But that's, so this is the lesson here for me. This is Korean proverb. You know, he cannot tell the difference between crap and bean paste. It's not so easy, actually, but this ability to spot in your class, in your studies, in your friends, which ones are going to be successful. And they are not always the ones who are good academically. You know, often they are the ones who are not good academically. They are not always the ones who are, we call it the spirit of the party. You know, are doing a lot of socializing, a lot of entertaining, a lot of drinking and so on. It's finding the people with real talent that is going to make an impact on the world, because these are the people that you want to be working with and finding ideas to do things together with, especially in film, you know, because if you're a director, you need a cinematographer. If you don't write, you need a writer. If you need an editor, you need a producer, you need distribution. So the more people that you can connect with who have real talent is important. Do you have KFC here in Japan? KFC, yeah? This is the chart of things that taste like chicken. You know, like crocodile, rat, snake, emu, and then KFC is the least like chicken, the less. But it's knowing, you know, what really tastes like chicken. And this is the next lesson, because people at universities, they are always thinking in terms of, I have to have a job. You know, I have to be employed by a corporation or a company or an institution. And this is, you know, and is in the West, it's definitely the case, and every parent brings up their children to say, get a job, get a job, get a job. I think this is wrong, especially in today's world. And what the parents should be saying to their kids is, find an activity that you can make a living from, that you can make money from, to pay the rent and raise children and so on, you know, artists like Professor Tozer, and you know, who are not employed people. Because when you are employed, you are at the mercy of the boss. This says, when the top guys look down, they see only shitheads. When the bottom guys look up, they see only arseholes. Sorry about the phrase. And it's kind of a play on American words, actually, rather than British words. And, but don't ever let it, always better to be boss. Even if you're a small boss or only your own boss, because you are, than it is to be employed. And that's really at the NFTS what we are trying to achieve. And of course, when you're at a boss, you have responsibility. And the number one thing about leadership is to take responsibility for everything around you and what is happening. The best students I have, they never blame anyone else. If something goes wrong, it's their fault. Maybe they chose the wrong person. You know, maybe they didn't give them enough instruction. Maybe they didn't realize that they had particular challenges, and so on. So it's a really important thing.